Okay, can you hear me? Excellent. So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jorge Astilumendi. For the panelists, I'm the senior director of the Climate Resilience Center at the Atlantic Council. Atlantic Council is also a proud host of this space, the Resilience Hub, along with a set of partners that you can see on the banner. And today we're going to have a very timely conversation about how the financial sector in general could play an important role on addressing climate adaptation and nature-based solutions in general. But in particular, we're going to be focusing in Brazil. And I just wanted to, explain a bit of what the Atlantic Council has been doing in this space. We've, over the past 2 years and a half, in a collaboration with the UN high-level climate champions, we've been working on mobilizing the private financial sector, particularly the insurance sector, the institutional investor sector, all the pension funds and asset managers, and also the banking sector, to pay more attention to the role that they could play on advancing adaptation solutions and adaptation investments for climate change. And as part of that process, it's clear that there is a lot that could be brought to the table helpful from that sector into the conversation of this challenge. But at the same time, there is a lot that needs to happen in terms of that conversation between what the private sector can do or wants to do and what the public sector could do to actually motivate and mobilize further the private sector to be a partner on this. So, going to Brazil, Brazil has seen probably one of the most challenging and impactful year due to climate change this year, from the floods in Rio Grande do Sul to the wildfires and in the Amazon. And today's discussion wants to reflect a bit on what Brazil has been playing as a role in the world with the G20 process, but also the role that they could be playing in the lead up to Belém next year in COP30. So this is a precursor to what is going to be seen from Brazil, hopefully, as a government and as a civil society and as a private sector over the next 12 months. And we wanted to just jumpstart that conversation today. We're in Baku. This is a COP29. We haven't even finished COP29. We're not even in the first week of the end of the first week of the COP29. But we would like to start projecting how a country as powerful as Brazil, both intellectually but also politically, could play a global role for the next year. So with that, let me introduce my panel for today, for this session. We have Thelma Crook, who is a vice chair of IPCC. And please, Thelma, have a seat wherever you want. We have plenty of chairs today. Amy Barnes, who is the head of climate and sustainability strategy for Marsh McLennan. And we have Antonio Augusto Rebelo Reis, who is partner at Matias Filho. Thank you all for joining today. Let me just... give me 1 second. I lost my notes, and without my notes, at this point of the week, I cannot operate. So there you go. So we're gonna have a conversation today about the framing that I just made, but we're gonna divide that conversation into pieces. One is we're gonna talk broadly about climate change and climate adaptation. And I'm going to round a set of questions to the panel. And then we are circled back with a second round of questions around nature-based solutions. So we're going to go a bit deeper into that. So we're going to start with Amy. Amy, as a major insurance player in the world and with operations in Brazil and in the region, Marsh has been very engaged in work that focuses on building resilience and adaptation, investments and solutions. It will be delightful if we can get some examples that you could bring to a table on solutions from the insurance sector that are addressing adaptation to climate change. And additionally, how you're seeing the insurance industry reacting to events such as the Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. And any perspective from the global space on this, but also other examples from either Brazil or elsewhere that could inform how the Brazilian insurance sector could be addressing these issues.
How long do I have? Can I take an hour or not quite? So I think we tend to use the words resilience and adaptation interchangeably, even though we all know that they're not the same thing. So insurance has a really important role. It provides resilience. It provides financial resilience to people when the worst happens. But in order to be able to buy insurance, you also need to have resilience. You need to have managed your risks. And if you stop managing your risk, then insurance is no longer available. So I think understanding where insurance fits within that ecosystem is really important. So insurance, if I can then take a step back and talk a little bit about adaptation so I can explain some of the places insurance fits. So when we think about adaptation from a corporate perspective, which is where I spend 90% of my time, our clients are thinking about protecting their assets. We need to think about at the asset location level, we need to think about their operations and their people. Can their people still work in the same way? Do their people have different risks? And we need to think about emergency response. So an asset that may rely on a local pond for fire water, will it have access to that fire water in advance? So that's all of the really location-specific things. But adaptation and resilience doesn't happen just at one site. We need the system to be resilient as well. And within that system, we're worried about the supply chain, we're worried about our capital providers, so that's banks, that's insurers still being there to support. We think about government relations, we think about communities, we think about our customers. We need to think about ecosystem services. We need to think about how we rely on the climate and nature as inputs into our business. People really very quickly think about the role of water as an ecosystem service in manufacturing, and that's obvious in agriculture. But I'm not sure how many people think about water in high-tech sectors. So for the past 3 years in Taiwan, the government has been paying rice farmers not to plant rice so we have enough water to make semiconductors. And most people probably aren't assessing that vulnerability as part of their needs for resilience. So sorry to do that scene setting, which wasn't the question, but it's just insurance shows up in many of those buckets. Insurance shows up in one of those buckets as one of the capital providers that we need to make sure is still there to provide the financial resilience, because generally the reason we spend so much time talking about insurance now is because it is the lubricant of the financial system. Most businesses cannot afford to take a risk without insurance. They will not build a hospital, they will not fly an aeroplane without insurance. So if we're not doing the really hard work of adaptation, that lubricant of the financial system could dry up. But insurance also plays the role because if there is damage to your asset, insurance provides that financial certainty. So what are some of the cool things that the insurance industry is doing in resilience? So if we think about emerging markets, first of all, there have been a lot of advances in trying to close the protection gap. So insurance is, you could say in some economies it's a luxury good. It's not held by people everywhere, and Brazil actually has a very low rate of insurance penetration. I'm very happy to be corrected by my specialist colleagues here, but my numbers show that 80% of people in Brazil do not have insurance. Compare that to Europe, where 92% of people do have access to it. So we're trying to close that protection gap. So some of the tools for people are for small-scale farmers, having micro-insurance policies that mean if it doesn't rain enough in the critical 2 weeks after planting the seeds, they can get a payout. If there's too much sun when they should be harvesting, they can get a payout. If there's too much hot weather to work, they can get a payout. There are insurance policies for farmers because cows produce less milk in a heat wave. And so they can ensure the yield from their cows against excessive heats. So innovation in providing financial resources. But if we then take it more to that, to buildings, one of the things insurers are doing is we are using our tools as people who are expert at pricing risk to provide people a return on investment of the interventions that they can make. So if we think of capital expenditure falling into three main buckets, we've got revenue streams, and that's fantastic because people are building green energy plants because they can get a revenue. And we've got savings, and that's the world that I work in, helping people understand the savings that they can make by taking action now. So if at the moment your potential cost of a flood is 10, by 2030 that cost could be 20. We can tell you how much it's worth spending to reduce that financial exposure. So I'm really happy to go on, and I've tried to speak really quite briefly. So if I've been too brief on any of those points, please challenge me to go deeper. But I want to make sure the other panelists have time to speak as well, and I can come back on anything there.
Thank you, Amy. And I'll come back to you because I would like to, and I can just give you a foresight of what I'm thinking is, if you had the Rio Grande do Sul events, where would you start to produce a blueprint or an idea of what insurance could be used for to avoid or reduce the potential impacts of a second Rio Grande do Sul?
Yeah.
Where are the entry points?
No, I'll come back to that. Yeah.
We'll come back to that. But thank you. As you said, we want everybody to participate, including the audience. I see you very engaged, so happy to have you here. So Thelma, I would like your perspective on how policy makers reacted to the damage that they saw this year. Are they preparing with better data and metrics to build resilience of communities and the economy? And lastly, are they seeing the importance of engaging with the private sector in a bigger way to deal with the crisis? So, yeah, I think a broad vision, and particularly from the science point of view, how the science and policy are talking to each other based on the reality that they're seeing. So I'm opening the door for you to reign.
Thank you very much, Jorge, and good afternoon to all. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invitation. Okay, so let's talk about Rio Grande do Sul, but I would say that this year, Brazil has been absolutely impacted by events from north of Brazil with severe droughts in Amazonia, droughts that we have not seen before, unprecedented, and then the big floods in the south of Brazil, and then what we call the weather fires now in the Pantanal. We always had fires, but now they are amplifying in terms of intensity and the frequency as well. So this is to give you a little bit of a flavor of the size of Brazil. I was talking to Amy. It's a pleasure to have Amy here, and Antonio as well. I was telling them that we cover in Brazil 5,500 municipalities. 5,500 municipalities. IPCC in the report divided Brazil in 5 climatic zones, each one with its own problems, let's say, in terms of what have already been observed in terms of impact of climate change and what is projected to occur for different levels of warming. Well, so this gives a little bit of the complexity that we have in Brazil. Obviously, we were not expecting to have what we saw in the floods, and I myself, I might be absolutely wrong on this analysis. I say that regardless of what we would have done in adaptation, I think that we would not have been able to completely avoid the economic losses and the impact in the population that we had. So we do see, when we talk about adaptation, it's interesting. We have been, even in this context here, talking about mitigation and mitigation and mitigation and mitigation. And this reflects even on the amount of investments that are done for adaptation. There is a huge adaptation gap in terms of investments because the focus was mitigation. Because you think that if you do mitigation enough, you are reducing enormously the need for adaptation. And I remember very clear, there was, I'm talking about 20 years ago, when Brazil would not allow in this forum the word adaptation to be in the discussion. Why? Because we thought that when you are bringing adaptation, we are losing hope that you are going to do mitigation enough, that adaptation is not going to be needed. Despite the fact that adaptation has always been in the table of this forum, right? So now, after I think the global stocktake, when the message was adaptation is not anymore an option, it's an emergency. Well, now we are turning gears to another attention. And then for developing countries, this is an issue because on top of the investments they have to do to mitigate climate change, because this is not only federal government, it's state governments, it's local governments. Then now you have to cope and invest on adaptation, right? Now, so that is one issue. So I think that it took the governor and took everyone by really a surprise, let's say. Now, the science says that these types of events used to occur if you don't have climate change, but naturally. This is part of the natural phenomena. It would happen every 100 years. So you expect to have that. Now, it's difficult to say that if this was one of these events in Rio Grande do Sul, when it's going to happen again. We absolutely do not have any clue. Any clue. Will it really happen in 80 years, 60 years? It depends very much on many factors. But regardless of when it's going to happen, I think that we have to be prepared, or better prepared, to do that, to be able to cope or minimize the potential risks that you're going to have from these events. And it's not going to only happen in Rio Grande do Sul, obviously. So we are expecting more investments in the area of adaptation, but adaptation is an absolutely complex issue to address, much different from mitigation, because it's more in the qualitative side. You want to enhance resilience, you want to decrease vulnerability, you want to enhance the adaptive capacity of the ecosystems. So you're talking, what are the indicators that are going to lead us to really see if we are doing that, So one of the issues that I see, Jorge, and it goes different in Brazil, is the amount of data that we have. Data and information that some areas do not have. Second issue that I see is that you have within the same, for instance, municipality, you have areas that are more vulnerable than others, because you have to consider the socio-economic issue fitted into the vulnerabilities that are going to be natural. For instance, sea level rise. But sea level rise, if we have it, is going to affect all the population in a given region? No. It's going to affect those that are living in the coastal zones. It's going to affect the assets in those areas that could be affected by that. So this is why I say there is this complex treatment of adaptation. Science, from the IPCC says that risk analysis, which Amy has mentioned, for insurance, you do risk analysis. What is the risk that I have, so that I'll see how much I'm going to charge for this insurance here. So when you do the risk analysis, you think of what type of hazard I'm going to have. Is it a flood? Is it a drought? Is it a fire, for instance, right? Now, what are the vulnerability? And then it gets the complexity I told you about. So it is not, spread evenly, even in a municipality that could be quite small. And finally, the exposure that, you have your assets. So these three components make the risk analysis. Now, do we have data enough to really do a good vulnerability analysis, And more than that, the vulnerability, even if you are being able to assess that now, if you implement adaptation measures, it's going to reduce that vulnerability, right? So it's this complex, dynamic area of adaptation which makes it which makes it difficult, let's say, to address. Inevitable. I think that I hope to see a more balanced investment from international cooperation, inclusive, and from the private sector to compensate, the need for us to increase adaptation in parallel to the mitigation efforts that we are already doing. I hope this helps. You mentioned the private sector. It's an absolute must. Absolutely must. Now, to finalize my intervention, Jorge, I think that the solution for types of events like this, did we learn? Our lessons learned, in my view, the lessons learned should not only be assimilated by the public power, right? It needs, even if you think of solutions, if these solutions are not shared with the communities, it doesn't work. So you need to work a solution together with them so that they understand why that solution is being put in the table and accept that intervention, let's say. Because if you ask, we saw this very clearly. It's not the first time that Rio Grande do Sul is affected by a flood. So they lose everything once, the communities, then lose twice and then reconstruct, and then lose 3 times and then reconstruct in the same place. And if you ask, do you want to leave this place? They will say, no. This is our life, this is our livelihood. We don't want to leave, but it's dangerous for you. So we need to really rethink completely how the public policies and the need for this public engagement in inclusiveness in the implementation of adaptation measures. Yeah.
Telma, that was quite comprehensive, and you put us a challenge in front of us that we need to figure out how to overcome at so many levels. Yeah. And so let's move with that mind frame to Antonio, who has all the answers to this. There has been a lot of, global political leadership that Brazil has been taking, with the G20 and now with COP30. But let's look inside Brazil. What is the political leadership that they are taking internally to both, envision regulations that could promote further investments on adaptation by both public actors, but also the private sector? What is going on there?
Thank you, Jorge, and Atlantic Council for the invitation. I'm honored to be here with such great colleagues and to learn from the experience. I'm an environmental and climate change lawyer. By the way, I'm not an insurance lawyer. But I have to say that I'm really happy to have this conversation and to see that over the past few years, it's been more and more common for us to be on the same table, the insurance sector and the climate professionals, because it makes total sense. If we combine the talks here from Thelma and Amy, you see that on the one hand, we have a total scientific disaster in terms of situation we have right now. I mean, the prognosis is not very positive, unfortunately. And if we look at the insurance coverage in Brazil, for example, it's so little. If you look at Rio Grande do Sul, as Jorge mentioned, I might be wrong, but I think around 5% of the losses were covered by insurance. And as someone properly said, in Brazil we tend to do things over and over the same way. We need to find the right policies to avoid this in the future. And that, going to Jorge's provocation, of course needs to include all sectors. And I'm really happy to see that the insurance sector is deep into this discussion right now, because they are the experts in, as Amy said, pricing those risks, understanding, and I'm sure that they've done this internally for a long time, but now it's time to share this with society in general and contribute to developing those policies. In Brazil, Jorge, I think Brazil, I was talking to Amy, was one of the first, if not the first country to have a specific regulation on insurance companies that demands a specific policy on sustainability that includes addressing climate risks. And we're talking about physical risks, transitional risk, and litigation risks, because of course we cannot rule out that possibility as well. Litigation serves a purpose for many things, and I can totally see this happening here involving the insurance sector as well. So Brazil is doing something on the regulatory side, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. We do need to work together with the sector, both as underwriter, as risk taker, and also as an investor. We need, as someone was saying, people would tend to do the same thing again. How we avoid that? By driving them to the other way, by flowing the capital in the right decision and in the right direction. So what kind of construction are we financing now? Are we going to finance the rebuilding of exactly the same thing in Rio Grande do Sul and elsewhere? No. Are we insuring those constructions if they're not adapted to this new reality? I think we should not. And what are the the signs that we're giving them? Right? How are we designing the products to push and foster the investments in the proper direction? So I think there's a very crucial role for regulation to play, a very crucial role for the financial sector and for the insurance sector to play, and then we do need to be doing this together. On the mitigation side, I know that we're talking more here about adaptation, but I cannot avoid to mention also the possibility of the insurance sector fostering very highly the mitigation sector in Brazil as well. Maybe we'll talk about this later, Jorge, but I'm sorry if I'm anticipating this, but I can also see that as an investor, the insurance sector may play a very significant role in Brazil. In Brazil, we do have a problem in attracting capital. It's a challenge, right? We have the brains, as Thelma is here with us, and we have the ideas, but sometimes it's not very easy. I was also talking with Amy. We need to have state policies, not governmental policies. We cannot change every 4 years the direction this country is going, right? And to do that, we need the private sector to help design the investment vehicles that will, like in the long run, foster the both mitigation and adaptation. And we have some examples. We're actually right now today discussing maybe we will pass a bill on carbon markets in Brazil, a carbon pricing bill. Supposed to be voted yesterday. Now it's today. Let's see. But and there's a very interesting provision that it's there to be voted. We don't know whether it's going to be passed, which says that insurance companies will mandatorily invest in the assets around that regulated market, and that includes carbon credits, emission allowances, and all that. And when we talk about Brazil, mostly we're talking about nature-based projects, so we would have like a mandatory demand being provided by insurance companies, and it's a great amount of money that could be flown into mitigation as well, and of course with all the co-benefits on biodiversity, social benefits, and all that. So I think there's a lot to do, and we need to do that together, and I think we're evolving in Brazil. Of course, we need to learn from the bad experiences. It's not a simple process in Brazil if you look back in history, but I think the urgency of the scenario is putting us in edge that we kind of need to do it right now. So I try to be enthusiastic here on the possibility of us evolving on that topic, and I look forward to keep working with the companies and government and addressing those issues.
Thank you, Antonio. And now I'm going to challenge the panel to go from general to specific. And we're going to use nature-based solutions as the that driver to help us a bit more, be more specific. I was talking with Thelma right before the session, and we were saying that nature-based solutions could be a solution, and she was saying it's an option. So let's go with that mind frame, because once we lose it, then it's not an option. It's not a solution anymore if we don't invest in it. So, Amy, coming back to you, we're coming out of Cali, of the Biodiversity COP, and there was a lot of talk and movement from the private sector on looking into that. But we'd love to hear from Marsh, what are examples, cases that you've been working on advancing nature as part of the of both insuring nature, but also using nature as a driver for risk management.
And I'll try and weave that into the question you posed me earlier about how to address the major floods that you had in the south. If I start off on that topic, so when we think about resilience, two parts. We need to resist the threat that is brought by the peril. Let's call it flood. We want to resist the water as much as we can, and then when the water goes, we need to recover as quickly as possible. So they're the two components. And there are actions that you can take at your own assets to resist, and you can build your house out of materials or your office that makes it easy to recover. But there are some interventions that we need at this systems level. And so at the systems level, the challenge that the insurance industry have and that we have as a society is that the person that bears the cost of that intervention isn't always the same person that benefits from it. I promise you I'm getting to a nature-based answer. So if we were to go to Milwaukee in the US, there's a community of, I don't know, I'll make it up, I can't remember how many houses, let's say 300 houses. And a charity called Ducks Unlimited has bought a large area of land, and they're planning to restore the wetland. And by restoring the wetland, a really positive nature-based outcome, they will minimize the flood risk to those houses. But we don't have a mechanism for those 300 houses to pay for that ecosystem service that the wetland is now providing. So could insurance be a mechanism for helping to pay for that externality? That's one of the tools that I'm really excited. Insurance isn't doing it yet, by the way, because insurance isn't mandated. You can choose your insurance company. There's no formality to the sector. But if we recognize that we need systems levels interventions for many of the resilience measures that we need, then we have to find an economic model for those externalities while avoiding kind of the prisoner's dilemma or the freeloader that one of those 300 houses, like there's nothing at the moment compelling them to pay, and so they don't need to. So that's one of the ways that we need to address those major flood events. There's early warning systems, there's lots of that. But let me go into nature-based solutions. In the press, there have been some really nice case studies about insurances in Belize for coral reefs. There have been some in Hawaii, insurances for mangrove, for these really important nature assets. So if we look at the Belize one, we weren't involved in it, but it's Belize refinanced their sovereign debt. Part of the Belize economy, a very significant part, is tourism. And so in the event that a hurricane came through and there was significant damage to the coral reef, that would damage the revenue streams of the country and harm their ability to service the debt. So there's an insurance product there that in the event that a windstorm comes through, damages the coral, we can send people out. And it is literally, if you stick coral back together using glue, it can recover really quickly. But we need to have the money to do that. And so that supports the tourist economy, which supports the servicing of the sovereign debt. But those examples are fairly niche. What I'm most excited about is if we can use the insurance industry as a catalyst for micro nature-based interventions. Now, I'm going to use a European example. In the UK, loads of people have put hard standing over their driveways. When they drive home onto their house, they want to drive onto a piece of tarmac to put their car, and guess what? When they come home from work, they don't really want to cut grass, so they have put hard standing over their gardens. Wouldn't it be nice as an insurance industry if we could prove that having a more natural landscape, a natural environment provided better resilience, and so we're protecting nature at a wide scale because every single homeowner is encouraged to protect nature because it reduces their risk of some perils. So we're not there yet, but that is where I have a huge amount of optimism that if we can get the data together, we could be really transformative. And then the other area is to use the insurance industry to come up with some kind of pricing mechanism for these externalities where we need nature to provide services to entire communities.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for bringing that microinsurance example. I think that's probably one of the ways to go to avoid this either freeloader or trade of the commons, as we know as well. Telma, on nature-based solutions, why are we not doing more on investing on nature? Is it data and metrics that is missing? And this is a very open question. At the same time, we have limited time. So Telma, I'm going to challenge you to figure out how to balance that.
Okay. So let me first explain why I don't say solutions, but I say options, right? Because it would be solutions if we would be coping with the problem itself, which is the emissions from fossil fuels. It doesn't matter whatever I can do using nature, ecosystem-based adaptation, as the IPCC reinforces, as well as the Convention on biological diversity stresses. It doesn't matter. They are ecosystem, nature, absolutely vulnerable to the extreme events that we are anticipating, and more frequent and more intense with the rise in the temperature. So I'm not saying that these options would not be needed. They are needed because nature is a partner. It's an important partner. So we cannot simply say we are not thinking about these options, but we have to think balanced with what is potentially going to happen with that option. It might not be a solution. This is why I say it might not be a solution, because a solution to me is something that really, resolves the issue, right? And it's not going to resolve the issue. So having said that, can I just comment on something on Antonio? Antonio said the market, right? The only thing that I fear is that all the burden of paying for the carbon markets being used to offset emissions, elsewhere, and the burden of paying for anything that happens on that area, in particular forests, right, is going to be on us, on whoever is doing, not on who is buying, but who is producing that reduction. So I think that we had that discussion before in this forum under the Kyoto Protocol. But I think that it's not fair in the sense that it's good, but who pays the burden for the insurance lies on whoever is producing the credits, whereas it should be paid for whoever is buying the credits. And that, if I have more time, you tell me, because I can tell you what's happening in Brazil in terms of adaptation.
We have very little time. Sorry. We have very little time, unfortunately. Yeah, because we have also very interesting announcements towards the end of the session. So stick around. I'll keep it as a surprise for now, but we have 3, so that's a lot. Antonio, similar question to Telma. What is happening in Brazil in terms of regulations and promotion of investments on nature-based solutions, and why is not? And if not much, why not?
Yeah. No, and I agree. It's not a simple topic, but we've been involved in several nature-based projects in Brazil, both on the adaptation and mitigation aspect, mangroves and forests in general, conservation. And I got to say, of course, the price is an issue. I mean, are we putting the right price on it, and then it really covers all the benefits that are being generated, who's paying, who's buying that. And we've been trying to think outside the box here in creating financing structures to make it viable. We are sure about the risks associated with biodiversity loss. I think that's a given right now, and it should go together with the climate matters. I mean, we cannot talk one thing without the other. Right now, but so investment is one issue, and the other one, it's insurance is a big issue as well. I've been talking to several developers, project developers, and it's always we want to do the entire financing structure. Who's gonna ensure that in case we have a huge fire and we lose all the forests, who's gonna cover that? And then there's no product available, at least. That's what I hear, and then it's very sensitive to this market. So if we do want to foster nature-based options, as Thelma was very properly saying here, we do have to find those solutions. So we need the insurance sector to work with us to develop this. How are we going to make it more stable? Please, Amy.
So when I was talking about nature-based solution, I was talking about them for resilience rather than mitigation and the carbon credit. So if I just quickly on the carbon credit market, there is an evolving insurance for carbon credits. The challenge is a lot of the developers are looking for insurance to be a guarantee. They want it to be a financial guarantee that if there is any disruption to the business, that the insurance will pay out. And insurance is most often a peril-based. So if there's a fire, is there a fraud? Is there some sort of reversal? And so those peril-based insurances have been developed. One of the challenges has been in Latin America generally, has been fronting, has been the compliance. So those policies exist. It's just very complex to get them into Latin America. So I think what we really need is an insurance partner that either wants to front for the international players who can, so they can learn, or who want to write it themselves, and we'll help them do that.
Well, let's work together on that, because we are doing that on the financial front. So yeah, combining different sources, blended finance, and public governmental funds, private funds, and let's bring the insurance companies together to
Done.
the table. Yeah. That's
Well,
it.
thank you so much, Antonio, and thank you so much, Thelma and Amy, for being in the panel. A round of applause, because please. And with that, I'll invite you to go back to the audience, and we're going to move to the last part of our session with a couple of announcements. I'm going to move back to the podium, if you don't mind. So first, as I said at the beginning of this session, the Atlantic Council, the Climate Resilience Center that I lead, we've been working over the past 2 years with a global set of actors from the financial sector, both the banking sector, insurance sector, and institutional investor sector, on thinking through what are the contributions that the private sector is taking on climate adaptation. And as part of that, over this year, we created a set of processes to pull up inputs from the private financial sector into the new collective quantified goal that is being discussed and negotiated here in this COP. And so today we are launching 6 recommendations and a whole report with these recommendations coming from all these actors, global actors, towards that negotiation. So if you want to know more about it, you can visit 1billionresilient.org, which is the website of the Atlantic Council Climate Resilience Center, and you will find the report there. We're going to be launching it in our networks, and so you'll get it there. But that was the first announcement, the first surprise. The second, and that will lead me to invite soon our next speaker, is that we are going to be launching a partnership between the Atlantic Council, the Instituto Clima y Sociedade, IMARSH, to work over next year to figure out ways in which we can mobilize the insurance sector in Brazil by bringing experiences from international actors into Brazil, on the one hand, but also identifying what are the right processes, both regionally and globally, in which those efforts that are happening in Brazil could be elevated. So that's a huge partnership that we would like to announce. And the third announcement, I'll leave it for the end. But with that, given that I mentioned our partnership with IX, with Instituto Clima y Sociedade, and with Marsh, I wanted to invite Roberto Kishinami to the podium to give some closing remarks, and then we'll move to the final piece of the announcement with our other partners. So, Roberto, if you want to come here, you prefer there? Excellent.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jorge, for the opportunity. And on behalf of the Institute of Climate Society, on behalf of our director, Maria Neto, that is failing. Thank you. Well, the Institute is, since last year, focusing on the implementation phase of this mitigation and also adaptation. On that sense, one of the communities that is quite important for us is the finance, and within the finance also the insurance companies. This is a sector that is crucial to build actually resiliency in the country. And in this search, of course, the adaptation is part of the process. There are a lot of discussion on how much or at which point we can adapt, what are the limits that is imposed by the climate and by the nature. And for that, questions actually to assess on it. Thelma Krug is part of a group of scientists, a climatologist in the institute that will work on assessment on it. This is one part. Another one is that we perceive that in the country there is a lack of investment on the science side. The climatology in the country is lacking some investments for long, and we are working together, INPE, the National Institute for Space Science, that is responsible for many platforms. One that is very successful, that was conducted by Thelma, that is PRODIS, that has been assessing the deforestation issue for long. But we want also to strengthen to have it in the, let's say, the adaptation side, that is the Adapta Brazil. That is one platform that has data and has some, would say, guidelines for the subnational entities and even for private sector to build adaptation policies and actions. This is one part of the investment that we are lacking, and we are then promoting INPE to get these resources from government, but also from the private sector. I think that that is necessary. On top of that, the deal that we have with the Atlantic Council is quite important to, let's say, to have all these activities under one big umbrella. And we are very happy with the partnership that we have with the CINISEG, that is going very well in all the fronts. And Jorge, I think that this is the words that Maria and we as a team have for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto. Many thanks for the kind words, and I hope that we can, make something happen in the lead up to COP30. And with that, we'll move to the final part, and it's I would like to invite to the podium Diogo Oliveira, who is a president of the National Confederation of Insurance Companies in Brazil, to provide his remarks and to make an important announcement that is the last one for today, the last surprise that we have for today. So Diego, please.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to take part on this panel because I see that the insurance is being mentioned in several parts of this COP. I took part on COP in Dubai, and there was very little concern about the relevance of insurance in the climate adaptation agenda. And we've been working within Brazil and with international partners
to make people more aware that the insurance is an important instrument to the climate change agenda. First, as a risk taker, the final at the final point, the insurance market can pay for the damage caused by climate change, which is the most known role of insurance market. But I'd like to add two other important roles that even can be more important than that. The first, the insurance market is a risk manager market. What an insurance company does nowadays is to understand the risk, try to mitigate the risk, try to reduce the impact of the event. And these are much more important than paying for the claims. And this is pretty much important for the climate agenda because what we don't want is to have the losses. Nobody wants to have the losses. What we want is to prevent the losses, to reduce the losses when it happens, and to tackle the risk of occurring these losses. So I would like to reinforce and stress the importance of the insurance market as the risk manager. We can help the government, we can help the society to build a more resilient infrastructure, a more resilient society. And third, the insurance sector all around the world is one of the biggest institutional investors. So by the correct means, using the correct instruments, and with good regulation, I believe that insurance sector can be one important investor in climate change projects. So that's what we want to do. That's why I do believe that we need to be more participant on the discussions on the agenda. That's why we are here. That's why we are going to be at Belém, where I invite you all to the House of Seguro that we are going to build there in Belém, to show everyone that we are talking serious on the roles of the insurance market in the climate agenda. And one step on that Jorge just mentioned is that we are announcing today a partnership with the Atlantic Council and the ICS. We are launching a memorandum of understanding focused on, let's say, 4 main pillars, which are identifying regional and global actors and platforms, including those related to the G20 and the COP30, to which the efforts and leadership from Brazil insurance sector actors could be amplified. Second, influence the outcomes of relevant regional and global policy, processes and platforms in the lead up to G20 and COP30. Third, organizing engagements and convenings of regional and global actors and experiences that inform the insurance sector in both Brazil and international process. And third and final, creating reports and communication products capturing the results of those engagements and convenings. So it's a very well focused proposal that we are doing with Atlantic Council and ICS, and I'm very pleased to be the one to announce it here together with you. Thank you very much.
And with that, we close the panel, and we're going to have a small signing ceremony. If you want to stick around, you can take some pictures. Excellent. Thank you. If you can take a pic, I'm going to stand on that side. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry. Let's do a great job.
Yeah, no,
I'm confident on that.
now we've done the real.
Yeah. Signing is the most easy part of the job.
I think you're going to speak a lot with